This is the Rate of Rise series brought to you by Keys to the Shop. Today we're talking with Leigh Wetzle, roaster and co-founder at Cedar Coffee Roasters. Well, hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Rate of Rise series. This is the series where we have elevated conversations on roasting. So a very specific focus, learning about the science, the craft, the business, and the stories of roasting. And I'm really glad that this kind of a series has been helpful for all of you out there. And I'm glad to continue it here through the new year in 2024. And you know, today's episode is brought to you by Roast Magazine, which is one of the longest running and most respected trade journals in all of coffee. They not only produce a magazine with wonderful articles from business leaders, subject matter experts, scientists, and more in their magazine and online magazine, but they also publish books on green coffee, the value chain, the business of coffee and coffee roasting. I love the work that they do in their roast summits, and there's just a lot to take part in. When you go and subscribe to roastmagazine.com, you are plugged into probably the best resource in coffee roasting globally. And so I recommend that to you. Go subscribe to Roast Magazine right now. Check them out at roastmagazine.com. And you're going to see just how valuable this resource is for your coffee roastery. Today's episode is also brought to you by Roaster Tools, which is an award-winning software that helps manage your operations and sales in your roastery so that you can scale your business easily. They help you run a more profitable business with more ease and less stress. This makes e-commerce sales easy. It grows your wholesale with your wholesale portal. You can grow your wholesale sales with their wholesale portal. And also it saves a lot of time. You make less mistakes because it automatically calculates and plans all the tasks from roasting to blending, packaging, shipping. This is a great product. Go check them out at roastertools.com. All right, everybody. Well, I'm really glad to have you along again. Welcome. And today's episode, we're going to be talking with Leigh Wetzle, who is the roaster and co-founder, along with Winston Douglas Thomas, who is our past guest here on the show at Cedar Coffee Roasters in South Africa. Leigh has been in the industry now for 10 years. Since 2014, he has spent a majority of that time working for the renowned Rosetta Roastery and has worked in a variety of roles. He started as a coffee delivery driver and part-time barista, then a full-time barista, head barista and cafe manager, and ended up as their roaster and roastery manager. Along that journey, Leigh and the team there at the Rosetta Roastery won the Roastery of the Year in 2018, 2019. And then the last year, they won Best New Roastery at Cedar Coffee, which is the business that he co-founded and now runs along with Winston Douglas Thomas. And today we're going to be talking about that journey and from Leigh's perspective, how he has developed flexibility, resiliency, and an ability to stay grounded along the path of learning roasting, teaching roasting, and then having to take the helm of his own business and grow that. We talk all about the lessons that Leigh has learned as a roaster and the difference between just being a roaster and somebody who leads people in a team as a roastery manager. What it was like to go from having all of the things you need in a large roastery to starting Cedar Coffee and then using somebody else's roaster, renting time on that roaster while developing Cedar Coffee Roasters. And now, as they plan for their own roastery at Cedar Coffee Roasters, what's going into that and how has the last 10 years shaped the approach that they have there and what they want to accomplish in the next 10 years. So this is a lot of really great insight from Leigh, very humble, very knowledgeable. And I think if you are a roaster or you're just interested in roasting and the business of roasting, this is going to be a great conversation. So let's get right to it. Here now is my conversation with the roaster and co-founder of Cedar Coffee Roasters, Leigh Wetzle. All right, Leigh, welcome to Keys to the Shop. How's it going today?
Thanks for having me here, man. It's good to be here.
Yeah, you know, it's kind of South Africa week here we're at month at Keys to the Shop. We got done talking with the co-founder there at Cedar, Winston, and I heard the story of his career. And then we were talking about roasting. I really was interested in your journey in coffee, and especially the circumstances that you have been a part of as a roaster are just all over the map. And it's really exciting to kind of hear about your journey in these different contexts of professional development and being resilient and flexible. And I'm glad to have you on the show to talk about all of this. And of course, in the beginning of everyone's journey, there's a point at which we discover coffee. And I'm interested in how did you become a roaster? What is that thing that was just like, this is my gig. I'm going to dive headfirst into roasting?
Well, it's quite a crazy story because for a long time back, I always had this notion of I would want to create something or have a business of something. And I could never pinpoint what that would be. And throughout my college years, I was at the time studying to what was a business degree, but quite a general one. Normally, when you study in a BCom Gen, there's a running joke where it's like you're doing general mainly because you don't actually know what you want to do. So it's just this broad net that we would place over doing something in finance. I mean, it is something that would provide quite a like stable job. And then coffee was always seen as this hangout activity where we would actually just go out to town, try different coffee shops. And I think there was one incident when I actually went to a cafe, first time drinking, I think it was a pour over, it was a Kenyan, and that kind of sparked my interest in like coffee can be so much more than what you think it is. From there, I was still finishing my degree, and I told myself, the minute I finish this, I want to work in coffee. No experience, I just want to get into that industry, learn as much as I can, and then kind of build some kind of career out of it. And that's kind of what I did. I found a post that had this opportunity to work as a part time barista, but also you would have to be a driver. And I met up with, at the time, it was Rob, the owner of Rosetta, not knowing that they were already crushing it in the specialty coffee industry. I was like, it was just a coffee shop to me. We sat down in that interview. From the get go, I told him the reason I want to be here is to learn as much as I can so that one day I would be able to start my own coffee business. And that's kind of how I got into roasting because it was basically me trying to learn every aspect of the business. We all have this passion for coffee, and the minute you step into coffee, you find that the rabbit hole just gets deeper. So it's like you're making coffee, and then you learn about latte art, and then it's like talk about people, and then it's like, oh, this is beans, and this is how you actually roast coffee. And so that's kind of how it all went down. It was part-time barista, give me more roles, barista, cafe manager. Because it was still quite a small company, I got to grow with it and spend a lot of time working alongside head roaster and co-founder. And he kind of took me under his wing. That's kind of how I got into roasting. All they wanted was people that was passionate and willing to learn, and that's kind of what I provided.
How many years were you at Rosetta?
I was there for about 7 years.
I figured it was a while. And the reason why I'm asking is because you started this conversation by saying that you wanted to learn as much as you can so that you could start your own coffee shop, roastery business. Right. Yeah. And I know a lot of people who just get really worried, actually, when people say, I want to work for you because one day I want to open my own coffee business. It's a strange worry, but they're like, they're going to become my competitors. And you stayed there for 7 years learning. And I feel like that's more often the case if someone really wants to learn about coffee. Once they learn how much they need to learn, you're probably not going to see them starting their own business in 1 year. It sounds like that's the way it went for you. Like you were a super great asset to the business for 7 years.
Every time you take a new role, it kind of refreshes your mindset as to like what you're doing for the company. And I mean, one thing with Rosetta was that the environment was quite welcoming and you built quite a good relationship within the team. And I think one thing about the owners was that because I was upfront, they always knew that this would come. I remember my last day when I handed in my resignation, it was we literally sat down over coffee and I basically told them what my plan was. They were just so like happy that I could be an offspring from Rosetta and wished me the best. And although we are competing in the same market, I think we definitely have huge respect for one another. And I think it's a little bit different within our culture because of in South Africa, this industry is still young. Coffee here is normally a commodity, not necessarily deeper than where we all at in coffee. So if I could be an outlet to push the industry forward within specialty coffee, that's something that would benefit everyone that's running within this industry.
Yeah, that's a really great perspective to have. And in your 7 years at Rosetta, you go in work from, well, we'll say the bottom up or from the bottom in, again, deeper and deeper into coffee. I'm sure that seems to be the path of a lot of roasters where they learn so much about, extraction and service and what's behind this, but what's behind that, but what's behind that. Is that similar to your trajectory that drew you into now becoming the roastery manager at Rosetta? You hold a lot of sway in that position. There's a lot at stake. Obviously, you're the person to do that in that position because you know the company so well, you grew with it. But how did that go for you? What was the trajectory of getting into that roasting space, and what was the biggest challenge for you to take that on initially?
It was definitely like, as you said, how deep does this go? Like, that's interesting. Let's see what this is about. Because they knew kind of the path that I wanted to take, they knew that I had to learn as much as I can. At the time, I worked quite closely to Jono, who was our head roaster at the time and co-owner. So it was almost like we ran the roastery team, because a lot of the times you would find that these coffee shops or roasteries, you have to run quite a lot of roles at once. So it was literally me being a roastery manager for majority of the time, but then also having to cover barista shifts and basically hopping on the roaster when needed. So it was a juggling act, but we figuring out what we wanted for Rosetta at the time and the direction we want to take. That was reassuring to that they would actually allow me to take on that role and kind of run with it. I mean, when it's not your own company, you're still kind of working within a framework. And I think because I've been there so long, they knew the type of character I was and being someone who was reliable. So that all kind of played a good role in my journey, or like me growing into where we are right now.
So, in the context switching that you had to do, getting on the roaster, going to the bar shift, and getting back on the roaster, I mean, eventually you became roasting as the sole focus. And, managing the roastery means managing people, managing logistics. I'm curious, what are the biggest things that you had learned about roasting as a roaster, doing that job that allowed you to lead other people in production roasting, and then the logistics of, by the time you had taken that role on, it's a larger roastery. So there's more gears that are moving together. So what about what you learned as a roaster made you a better leader of roasters and a roastery department?
When I was under the wing of Jono, before we started roasting, he would pass on a lot of knowledge, and we would actually, QC used to be something that was of the utmost of importance. Like before even getting on the roasters, like how things affect roast profiles and what airflow does, or how origins differ from one another and what to look out for. And we went into so much theory before even touching the roaster that when it came to actually roasting, it made quite seamless putting all those theory into work. And then from that, being able to lead other people using the same kind of framework that I was taught. So it kind of created this blueprint that built quite a strong foundation for the next generation of roasters. So coming towards the end of my journey with Rosetta was I was heading up the roasting and then at the same time running as the roastery manager. But then I had someone that was kind of my understudy and providing that same kind of framework that I was taught and then going about it the same way. And what happened was at the time that I had to leave, she was quite well equipped to just seamlessly take over from me. And there wasn't as much information out back then. Well, roasting felt like this thing that you were gatekeeping. And I think right now we have so much access to all this information, and it definitely helps to then build that foundation of theory and then apply that when you actually roast it. That has definitely been the case with the situation that we're in now. You don't often get to roast on the same roaster, but you still need to put those theories into practice.
Right. You have to be knowledgeable about the theories. And then, of course, there's the translation of theory into regular work where there's a gap there. So it's one thing to read about roasting, but then another thing to stand in front of a roaster, and then quite another thing to use that framework as a curriculum to help somebody else become a good roaster. And you are not just thinking about coffee at that time, which I'm not sure if you could share briefly about the fact that as you grew as a roastery, you're sourcing different beans based on your own expertise. So I'm sure that the sourcing and curation had changed, but also, you're not just a coffee person anymore. You're a people person when you're leading a team. So how did your curation process for coffee change, and how did your time curation and focus change from coffee to coffee and people?
People forget that it's not just about roasting. Like roasting is kind of, I wouldn't say the only fun part, but I mean that's the end product. But everything before that comes into place, whether it's like you said, you're working with people, you're working with clients, logistics is a thing, and you're prepping to get to that point. And then the fun part is actually the QC and the tasting, because that is something that you implement on a weekly basis. That this is the result of what we are producing. You're roasting for, let's say, 2 days a week over here in Cape Town. And then the rest of the day is dealing with people, making sure that your forecasting has always been a challenge, dealing with the constraints within South Africa. We were blessed to be able to pull samples from all over the world, which is not necessarily the case right now with Cedar, and we're getting up to that. So you have to work within that constraints, but then also with the people and learn to be a manager at the same time. And the biggest challenge would be getting people to be on the same wavelength as you and to also kind of empower. I think that is something that is really important. It's not, yes, you're the manager, but we work here as a team. It means that we can lean on each other. I think that was something that was really powerful and definitely had a bigger impact on like pushing us forward and being able to provide better service. Because yes, we're roasting coffee, but I mean we're not just roasting for ourselves, we're here to satisfy a customer need. So we need to work with them or be able to satisfy that need. So it doesn't matter if your coffee is the best. If the service that you're giving clients is not up to scratch, then you can forget it.
Yeah. Oh man, the service to clients, that's consistent with what we talked about, hospitality with Winston earlier, and guest experience and that kind of thing. And I don't know if I can trust myself anymore because I'm so warped in my view of coffee. I'm such an insider in coffee that do I even know how to speak that language anymore? And that feels like the most uphill battle, the language of the consumer. And think I'm speaking clearly, but when the eyes start glazing over, I'm just like, oh man, I think I just killed somebody. I don't know. Uh, so the idea of staying connected to the consumer's preference and keeping your own ideas in check, not that we shouldn't have excellence as a standard, but of course we're all about trying to be connected to people, right? So that's a great point at which I think we can shift our conversation to say you are now 7 years into Rosetta. You've got a team of people, you're sourcing great coffees. These folks are been raised up to roast great coffee, and now you start Cedar. And when you start something like that, it's not like you're just going to make a linear move right over to an equal sized roastery with a team of people. Now it's just you. And in fact, it's you on a rental. It's not even your roasting space, it's you on a roasting machine. I think Winston mentioned something about a local roaster manufacturer that everyone uses there. So, what was that like going from, hey, I've got all the tools, I've got the bat cave here, and now I'm digging a new one?
Mm. Man, it was quite the journey because I think a lot of the times myself and Winston we lean on the experience that we accumulated through working on big cafes and roasteries. And one thing we thought about it was like we started something that's new. Yes, we know people in the industry, but we don't have clients. This is something that is new. But we also knew that a lot of roasters here are roasting about twice a week, maybe three times, but there is space. So that was the opportunity where we're like, cool, we could help someone else. At the end of the day, what happens to the other 3 days? It's sitting there gathering dust. So why not approach someone and see if you could find some kind of agreement where you roasting time or spending time on someone else's roaster. It's funny because it depends on how people are taking it. Because at the time before we started, people would normally keep to themselves. It's like their company and they're doing things their way. And here we here we rocking up on your door and I'm like, hey, do you mind if we roast on your roaster? And I think people are just taken aback where it's like, I haven't thought about it. You want to start something, you buy a roaster, you roast coffee, you send it up. I mean, people were open, but now The challenge that you get is that you have this new relationship with someone else. Some of them are in different avenues within coffee. Some are focusing on commodity coffee, some is focused on specialty coffee, but you're dealing with different personalities. So it's fun, it's exciting, and at the same time, you're also constricted by their time. And I think that was the biggest challenge. Like, you don't get to roast when you want. Everyone wants to roast on a Monday, so you roast on a Tuesday. So you kind of have to build a model around that. But I mean, we started out on a 6 kg roaster. I think we wanted it for about 6 months and we had to move on to a 15 kg. So that is also the benefit of not owning your own roaster. It's the fact that you could move and work on something on a different roaster that provides scale without the need to fork out so much money. So what we decided is to use our resources and rather put that within our roastery. So the roastery is basically our office space, dispatch, everything but a roaster. So we always get people coming in and like, oh, so this is Cedar Coffee Roasters, and but I don't see a roaster. So like, yeah, about that, we have to roast somewhere else. So the funny thing is that we actually won best new roastery without having a roaster. So
Oh, wow. Yeah.
I think that kind of highlights the fact that it could actually work. Maybe from your side, like there's probably a lot of co-hosting spaces, which I think is a brilliant idea, something that should definitely be implemented aside. But I mean, we're still quite behind on many things. It was just us exploiting an opportunity that people never thought of.
The company Cedar Coffee, any company that somebody starts is going to be sort of an amalgamation of their vision, their values, their ideas, the services they want to bring. What was that for Cedar Coffee? Because there's a lot of industry experience that you both brought to the table. You win best coffee roastery. There's more than just, oh, they have to have a roaster. It's more, this is what the company is about. These are the flavors that they're championing, the approach they have. How would you sum that up?
I think Cedar Coffee is, like you said, an amalgamation of our ideas, and we wanted Cedar to showcase our personality. So this is the experience that we brought in, but also paying homage to our background. So from where we are, if we have to talk about like our personal backgrounds and our family history, is like my family doesn't drink any specialty coffee. They still drinking instant coffee. It's still three sugars, milk. That's one aspect of where South Africa is at. And then we were blessed with the opportunity to work in specialty coffee. So we serve people coffee every day, and we could see that there's a link between the two. And because we're in between, we wanted Cedar to be this company that bridges the gap between conventional coffee to specialty, and but not in a way that makes it seem quite niche. Like we've always had this conversation, and some people would say that specialty coffee is a luxury product, and I understand that. Look at the amazing lots that people are getting, and everything is boutique, and everyone's working with these renowned farmers, and that's amazing. What that means is that we would curate coffees that is amazing, but we would also curate coffees that like are entry level into like, this is what coffee tastes like, or this is your assumption of what coffee tastes like with high quality beans, and then kind of guide and have people come with us on this journey to be like, cool, I always take this blend, it tastes like chocolates and nuts and all these things, and then you gradually get them to, well, they get themselves to taste different things, and it's always a, oh, what is this? So this is a single origin, but they would always say like, oh, so this is a single origin blend. It's like, no, that's just a single origin. This is what a blend is. And then people would find something that kind of speaks to them. And I guess that is also a reflection of how it is to be a barista. It's like you get that customer that comes in for a mocha, and then he's drinking a flat white, three sugars. Then it's just a flat white, no sugar. Then it's black. Then it's a pour over. And it's like, how did we get to this point? And it's basically about like connecting with people and allowing them the opportunity to come to it themselves. So that's kind of our aim and kind of what we want to do with Cedar. But at the same time, we don't want to dull specialty coffee down or be like, we know we've been there or we've learned so much about coffee and we know what coffee is and what it can be. But at the same time, we don't want to alienate any customers. So we want you to feel part of the journey with us.
I love that. And it strikes me how much expertise and experience, and maybe even, dare I say, complexity it takes to do simplicity really well. And the idea of this is entry level coffee is great. This is crowd pleasing coffee. This is simple coffee. You understand this, But look how much education and experience it took to make that a consistent experience where your customers enter in with all of the baggage that they had before from drinking coffee that was also entry level, but didn't necessarily have the same expertise behind it. So they shed all of the defense mechanisms, I say. They may have put sugar in their coffee because it's their preference, but sometimes people's preferences in coffee are based on trying to defend themselves against the missteps of the roaster or the barista. They just want a good coffee, and it doesn't seem like it's going to come from the cafe, so they have to make it happen at the condiment bar. So that's a good result to say this is entry level, this is simple, but it's also something that you can feel free to enjoy in simplicity as well.
And I just like the fact that it's definitely been something where we've been in these situations where we see customers like they get two options and there's something that's progressive, it's something that's fruity and everything like that. But most times out of a lot, they are choosing something that's bold and chocolatey. And so it's like, that's cool. That is kind of where we at. And that's kind of what we base it on, where it's like we've made this blend specifically for this taste profile. And that's been such a hit. Sometimes we overcomplicate things because we sometimes stuck in our own world, and maybe the two of us are having a conversation about this amazing Panama geisha or a thermal shot Colombian. So that's amazing, but like they have that with a customer and they're like, a thermal what? Or like, this doesn't taste like coffee, it's like a fruit salad and it's not pleasant. But then 3 years later, they telling you about this fruit salad that, and then it's just like, huh, like you gave me so much flack for it, but you the one offering it to me. And that's amazing part. Like we've got people that we used to serve in other people's cafes, and this is this full circle moment where they actually buying coffee from us because they know that we've been on this journey with them for such a long time.
That is it. You're on a journey with them, and that buy-in moment. Ages ago, James Hoffman had this blog about the buy-in moment where we're trying to educate customers. It's that phrase we always say, I want to educate the consumer. I'm like, or do you want to justify your career choice? I mean, which one is it? And uh, we're you're in coffee, it's okay. But the buy in moment allows the customer the dignity to choose the fruit salad or the flavors that you really, really want them to know about right now. But they're just not ready. They just need give them a cup of coffee and just wait. Man. So let me ask you this. Now you have been roasting on another roaster offsite, but you're building all of the infrastructure. You're building the logistics, the distribution, the branding, all of that stuff, curating the offerings and green sourcing. Now you're opening up your own roastery. Now you're actually the architect of your own destiny, your own roastery. So, with this opportunity, it must feel very exciting. What is going to go into that based on what you've learned through this whole arc of your career from Rosetta to rental to your own space?
I think we take a lot of experience from where we come from, and yes, we sometimes we are building from what has worked. And I think the thing that is like really effective and something that we like to think of ourselves as not necessarily the conventional roastery here in Cape Town. So we like to be quite hands-on. So with our roastery, it's more about how do we free up time for myself and Winston to actually be there with clients. We don't want to be seen as someone who's just a supplier, drop of coffee, cool, and we go on about our day. We like to get stuck in. And I think that's also the reason how we started Cedar, the roastery was. We had this idea, it's like, cool, because people normally start cafes and they have a roastery afterwards. And we thought, like, we're only two guys. We could make more of an impact if we start as a roastery, being able to supply other coffee shops. And that's actually been working because coffee shops or cafes don't see us as their competitor. They see us as one of their partners. And we like to promote like collaborative experiences. So we enjoy doing pop-up events with our clients, being in their space, working on their machine, working with their baristas, and whether it's once off thins or a project that they want to start that has got nothing to do with coffee, it makes it quite fun because coffee is our backbone and definitely a thing that we're really good at. I would say we're coffee guys, but there's so much more to learn about the roastery and roles that we haven't even like scratched the surface on. So we use our expertise to be that helping hand for our clients, and I think that has really changed the game. So the way we've kind of want to design our roastery is to kind of free off time for us to be that sales rep. Like instead of getting sales rep, the only one that can sell your business is yourself, and people want to feel that authenticity. And the best moment for us is when people get kind of what we're about and they can see it in everything we do. And it's not just something that we want to preach and not deliver. So we a lot of times we say we're not a coffee roastery, we're like a coffee solutions company. So that could mean anything. And we say we can do anything for you except work in your bar as a barista.
Well, let me ask what that means in terms of actual pen to paper planning of a roastery. If you say, I want this roastery to keep myself and Winston free enough to be in the mix of the relationships, which in turn will produce more business for the roastery through those relationships. What does that practically mean for how you design the space?
Yeah, we definitely need to get more people on board to free off like a lot of the operations, like have people dedicated to specific roles within this company. The end goal is to kind of have your own roastery because that allows you more freedom as to like what you can do. And then from there, it's about having a QC lab, just having proper structure that makes it a lot more seamless for anyone that steps into Cedar to know exactly like this is kind of how we operate and this is how efficient it could be. So that is about making sure that we have dedicated space for the training lab, being able to offer rentals on machines. And like these are all things that has been come from customer feedback because it may seem like these things are easily accessible overseas, but over here it's quite limiting. Also, like trying to have this coffee forecast system and where we can actually pull from a lot more sources and being able to intentionally source and partner with farmers and have that kind of run itself so that everything just needs to free us up to make more time to spend with people.
So you'll be training people, a team to work the roastery, similar to what you were doing at Rosetta. So you're back in the teacher role, I imagine.
Yeah, we want to get to a point where you're not working in the business, you're working on the business. And that does mean you have to give off a lot of the roles that you're currently doing and be able to trust people to fulfill that to the best of their ability. And that means we have to put in the structures and have a cedar way of doing things. And I think it's got a lot to do with sourcing the right people. Because at the end of the day, that person, if they are well looked after, and that's not just about like compensation, it's like they need to have that same passion. And then they will put that impact on what Seed is about, put their own mark, but also push us further. So it can't just be the Leigh and Winston show. This is Cedar and not about us really.
You are faced with then somebody coming in and saying, I'm really passionate about coffee. I want to learn as much as I can because one day I want to open up my own coffee roastery. What do you say?
I'll say, I'll say come along with this ride
Nice. Yes.
and let us teach you as much as we can. And that's the thing. Like, I think a lot of times what we find is like these coffee shops or roasteries that have been running for such a long time, we don't want to hit a point where it's like you were amazing in your first 3 years and then from there it tails down. It tails down because you let good people leave. And that's something we don't want. We want people to feel empowered. And if they do leave, that is because they are on to start something just like you and not because they were unhappy with the way we work. So you need to allow staff and clients and customers to actually push you because you don't know everything. And if you're not being dynamic and growing with everyone else, you're just going to be this roastery that was amazing in 2022 and it's like, yeah, they kind of, you know, that feeling where it's like, they just don't do the same or that barista doesn't work anymore. We don't want that. And I think consistency is more important than time for like perfection.
And as we end here, I'm curious because one thing that we don't want necessarily, and maybe this is something that we struggle with in the industry, is if we're constantly trying to not be that coffee shop that was great in that 2022 and then is not great in the future. You mentioned consistency, but a lot of people view that as I need to constantly be doing new things, put new ideas in place. And I'm afraid almost of consistency because there's this subconscious conflation of consistency equals mediocrity or stagnation or plateauing, even. And so, what's the balance in your mind between staying relevant and fresh and fulfilling for the people that are interacting with your brand and the trend chasing that may sometimes lead to inconsistency?
I think it's always important to kind of build this strong foundation and this brand identity as to like this is what Seed is about. And then yes, there are trends that will come and go. And I think for myself and Winston, and like when we started in the industry, it was completely different. And I think we still have like old school tendencies or we prefer things that is a little bit more something that has been around for a longer time. But that doesn't mean that we shy away from new processes or new ways of work. I think there's a difference between following trends because other people are following it, and then following trends because you see that this is kind of where the industry is going. Just taking it as much knowledge, keeping up to date. I mean, these podcasts and the things that you read, they are so important because sometimes it shows you the roadmap as to like where the industry is headed and where you want to push it. But at the same time, I think us being here in South Africa, we have this advantage of we look to these international trends. We're quite young in the industry. There's a lot of things that we will do that seems like, oh man, that's like game changer. But it's like, not really. They do this a lot in Copenhagen. But hey, so we get to kind of reap the benefits of people overseas kind of pushing the envelope and seeing that it does work with enough track record to then implement it ourselves.
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it for sure. And a very sober minded way to approach things that demand your attention in the industry is so connected, and you're protecting the experience that you're creating that is for other people to enjoy, your team. I love what you said. It's not the Lee and Winston show, it's Cedar Coffee. And as you grow that company, obviously, what we know about what's going into it, it looks really promising and amazing. And the years ahead look pretty bright for, or, chocolatey and earthy, not bright.
Good one.
Whatever. Leigh, thank you so much for being on Rate of Rise here. I've really enjoyed talking with you. Where can we follow along your journey and learn more about Cedar Coffee?
You can follow Cedar Coffee Roasters on Instagram. I'm not that great on Insta. You would notice that it's a fan page of my wife and my kid. So
Yeah,
follow everything through Cedar.
sounds great. Thank you so much, Leigh.
Awesome, man. Thanks so much for having me on.
All right, everybody. Well, I hope that you appreciated that conversation. I love the idea that it takes a lot of learning and becoming comfortable with your knowledge and helping others acquire knowledge to really approach consistent, simple, great coffee in a way that resonates with your customers. And Leigh certainly has this idea that, what we're doing is all about the customer and making something that they love and serving their needs. And the idea that they're building a roastery with the intention of it to enhance relationships is certainly something that bodes well for the future of Cedar Coffee Roasters. So a big thank you to Leigh for joining us on the show. I really appreciate you taking the time today, Leigh, to be on Rate of Rise here at Keys to the Shop. And if you're interested in learning more about Cedar Coffee Roasters, it's as easy as following at Cedar Coffee Roasters on Instagram and also cedarcoffeeroasters.com. And if you have any questions, comments, or feedback from me, you can always email those to chris@keystotheshop.com. Always love hearing from the listeners out there, Keys to the Shop audience. And I really appreciate all of you taking the time to listen. Don't forget to check out roastmagazine.com as well as roastertools.com and tune in for the next Rate of Rise. And as always, I hope that this episode has truly given you keys to the shop.